Let's ask you now about how that initial diagnosis was handled. And I'm thinking initially about the consultation, you know, where you go in, you might be expecting some bad news or, you know, some information that you're under investigation. How was that handled, and what do you think about that, looking back on it?
Looking back on it, I think the consultant concerned, he handled it really, really well. The only downside of it was, obviously, I didn't expect that news, and I took my wife and children with me.
Yeah.
My first thoughts when the consultant sat us all down and told me was for my family, because straight away I looked at their faces. For myself, it didn't hit me straight away, because I was expecting it to be something to do with health issues I'd had in the past. I never expected to hear that word. And it doesn't matter what people say to you, that word is always going to have a stigma. It always will. And you always think the worst. You think, your first thoughts is probably, how long have I got? And I think that is quite a natural reaction. And it's not until you go further down the line that you can see that it's not going to be that. And that you are going to get the best treatment possible. People are there to help you. And it's at times like that when also you see probably the true side of your family as well. And you realise how much they care for you, how much they love you. And they're all fighting with you. Even my little girl, although she's only 4, you could see her change in her. You know, we must look after Daddy and things like that. And all that comes to the fore. And at the time, that is such a great help, a great help. But as for my consultant himself, I thought he handled it marvellously.
But if I understand you correctly then, so you were going into the consultation not necessarily expecting a cancer diagnosis?
No.
You were just under investigation in general terms?
That's right, yeah. I didn't expect the cancer diagnosis at all. It was totally a bolt from the blue.
What was your emotional reaction overall to that, you know, that dreaded diagnosis of the cancer?
My first reaction was, if I've not got that long and I'm going to pass away, how will my family manage?
Yeah.
That was my first reaction.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for myself. That came further down the line.
Were you noticing in the consultation how they were reacting?
Yeah, I noticed straight. I mean, I could see tears in my wife's eyes and tears in my boy's eyes.
Yeah.
And then something sort of clicked inside. You've got to be strong. Don't start breaking down. Not now. Do it later. And my feelings were more for them initially, not necessarily for myself.
And they can take a cue from you if they see you coping.
That's
they
right.
will feel, oh, it can't be as bad as I'm fearing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I wanted, especially for my children, I wanted to be strong for them.
Yeah.
And show them that Daddy wasn't frightened and Daddy was going to beat this. No matter what, I was going to beat that.
They were going to see that determined outlook in you.
That's right.
And your son was there during that consultation?
That's right, my son.
How old was he at the time?
12. So obviously he understood. I mean, he's not a silly child. He understands these words and he knows what they can mean.
Definitely.
And he's seen it with probably his friends' parents or grandparents that have died of cancer or family members in the past. And he understood.
Now, after that initial news was given to you, sometimes in families, you know, it's not clear whether you want to talk about it, but some families, you know, they go home, they do want to talk, and they're able to discuss it themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too painful to do that, though, at that moment. What was the situation in your family?
Well, when we got home, it was getting quite late. My wife got my little girl ready for bed, and I'll be honest, the first thing I did, I went for a walk. I took my dog a walk, and I just needed to get my head together and think, well, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to handle the family? How am I going to talk to my children? How am I going to talk to my wife? And I just needed to get it clear in my head because I didn't want to go home and be a blubbering wreck, as it were. I wanted to try and be as calm as I possibly could and be strong, not just for me, but for them. I needed to be strong for them.
And in terms of that dialogue, did you find that you were able to have a discussion with them at later points?
What I did, my first reaction was for my little boy. I had a chat to him, and obviously you tell them not to worry, but they do worry. And then once that was over and he'd gone to bed that evening, it was, I think me and my wife stayed up to some ridiculous hour of the night, just talking over everything. I'll be totally honest, I'm not going to say it made me feel better, but I think it made my wife feel better, but not necessarily me. I didn't start to feel better psychologically until I started to talk to outside people, not necessarily family, people who understood, people who had been through it. And then I started to feel better, because I knew that it's not just me, there's loads of people like it. And although I love my family to bits, they were not necessarily the right people to speak to for support. Yes, they are there for you, for love and emotions, backup, but sometimes the outside people do just as good a job, if not better.